Fantastic, going live here now on this fantastic SafetyWing webinar today. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you're joining in from. I think we've got some noise in the background there. We might get people to pop off, anyone who's of our panelists in the back room or background team, we might get them to pop off their audio for now. So for those of you tuning in live, welcome. My name is Rowena Hennigan. I am your regular moderator for these SafetyWing webinars. They're once a month, and I really enjoy being here with the global audience that tune in. I've even got my SafetyWing pen handy today, which is nice. So welcome. Get comfortable, grab yourself some water, pen and paper if that's the way you like to tune in. If you're joining us on playback, special welcome as well, because I know lots of people do that, join in and watch the playback. So I'm still hearing some noise in the background, so I'm just going to request them in the back room, to the backroom team and to the panelists, that they maybe pop onto mute. So I can see people joining I can see some people joining in to the waiting room and coming through. We've got some attendees coming through. So welcome as usual. Benvenidas a Folcher That's Irish Gaelic. If you don't recognize it, my name is Rowena Hennigan. I'm going to be the moderator today for your regular SafetyWing webinar. Fantastic topic today. Is anyone else going, oh my gosh, it's a Q4 already, start of October? So we are into the last quarter of the year. So fantastic to have this topic, looking at trends, looking at how HR supports benefits and the ways as HR teams and leaders and managers we can support everyone in our organization going forward into 2024. So fantastic to have that chance today with our expert global team the panelists are fantastic, by the way. I was just having a chat with them in the back room in the preparation for this. It's fantastic to have this chance to do that stock take on this year, to look forward to the trends and to basically get their expert insight. It's a really good way for us all to reflect and take stock. So what are the emerging trends? What are some of these top borderless benefits? If we take out that HR crystal ball, I don't have a crystal ball, but I certainly know that I always come away with learnings from these types of sessions when I talk to my peers and when I reflect on the various trends and insights going forward. So welcome. You can, while you're getting comfortable tuning in, when we just have a few more people popping in, you can pop into the chat box where you're joining us from today. I'm in Zaragoza. My name is Rowena Hennigan, known as Row Remote, in a very good mood today, very good mood. And that's because I've been included in the BBC News in a feature article today. So you can pop that into your Google or search engine for that. So delighted that that interview that I gave a couple of weeks ago on nomadism has been featured by BBC News. And I'm in a really good mood today. Zaragoza is very autumnal, lots of leaves falling on the ground, and the colors are fabulous. So follow me on LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn top voice on remote work, and on there you can connect, you can subscribe to my newsletter. So wonderful to be here today with this expert panel. And moving right along, let's see what we have next. Well, yeah, we have to thank the amazing SafetyWing, don't we? So they sponsor these webinars every month. And SafetyWing, if you don't know them, are global benefits for a remote workforce. They're amazing, remote first company themselves, lots of nomads as well in the SafetyWing team. And it's fantastic to have them sponsoring these amazing webinars every month with all these fantastic experts from all over the world. You can check out SafetyWing's offerings. You can find out more about their health insurance offering for remote teams and for global borderless work. So they're really supporting that revolution. SafetyWing are building a global safety net, and these blocks, this illustration in this picture is a fantastic way of understanding what they've been doing so far and how they are providing the infrastructure. I mentioned this in the BBC News article, actually, when I was interviewed. They are providing the infrastructure needed for global borderless living and for nomadism all around the world. So we're big fans, and I'm certainly a big fan of their work. And it's very clear here, looking at the blocks, how they've got that planned out, and we're to be very grateful for them providing that infrastructure for our community and global remote working. The agenda today is we're going to kick off with a little poll just to break the ice, get a feel for where you all are in terms of the audience. We're going to move on to the panel discussion. We'll introduce our experts and cover off some already prepared questions. And then we'll move to Q&A, a really important point on Q&A. And many of you who know me from joining in regularly, I love to get the questions early because then maybe I can answer them as we go along. So make sure you pop them into Q&A, your Q&A box on the webinar control panel, and we'll see if the experts can answer those as we go. So pop them in at any point and as soon as possible if you can. So let's launch the poll, Kurt, and get a feel for the profile of our audience today. So is your organization, is your team borderless? Click whichever one of these, pick whichever one of these resonates with you. Maybe you don't have any plans to become borderless. Maybe you're only remote in a certain region or country, and that matters too. I think it's really interesting for bigger countries like India, Australia. Sometimes we forget Indonesia that they can be borderless within their countries but still be remote, and they don't have to go completely international. You don't, you want to become borderless in the future. You're tuning in just to learn about that, and you are already, maybe you've got 2, 3 to 5 or 6 countries there. So we're collecting responses. I think we've got about 60% voted already. So let's give it another sort of 30 seconds. And for those of you who have answered, let us know where you're tuning in from today. I know today on our panel, we've got Europe across to the States, across to South America represented. So I wonder where you're tuning in for. And when it hits 65, 70%, we'll close the poll. So let's give it another minute or two. A few seconds or so, and I think we're going to get as near as we're going to get to those answers. We got 67% voted, 66, 67%, and Kurt will pop up the responses, the results of that poll now. So got 8%, no, we don't have plans to become borderless. No, but we do want to become borderless in the future, about 16% saying that. And then quite a lot of you are already outside of your own geographic location country-wise. You're in 2 countries, 3 to 5 or 6 or more, 43%. That's quite impressive given that 66% have voted. So thank you for that. That's really, really useful to us to understand the profile of who's joining in and the different levels. So thanks for sharing that. And let's see who's going to be joining us today. Let's check out our wonderful, look at those lovely faces we've got there. We've got Jay Robertson from Prospera. Thank you for joining in. And you can find out more about Jay by checking out his LinkedIn, his profile on LinkedIn. We've got Justin from Torre AI. Oh, topical Torre, that isn't it, Justin? So we'll be interested to speak to you. And Aaron, an old friend of mine, talent acquisition specialist, and someone who I value very much, their expert opinion, is joining in as well. And they're in all different parts of the world. So welcome, welcome, wonderful panelists. So glad you could make the time today to join. Perhaps when you're ready, you can pop on your cameras and we'll start welcoming everyone into the virtual room. And we'll get them all to do a little introduction, all these smiley faces. Can we see if we've got some wavers with us today? Yay, let's give everyone a wave. Welcome, welcome, fantastic. So I was really excited when I saw this lineup, not only just because Erin was on it, but also because we had quite a diverse, we had someone on AI, and we also have Jay as well joining in from Prospera, and with such a wealth of knowledge in the panel. So delighted that you could all make the time today. So I'm going to go around the virtual room. Jay, I'll go over to you first, then to Erin, then to Justin. Could you give us a little bit of an introduction, 15, 20 seconds? Let us know where you are today and why you're interested in contributing to this topic.
Yeah, glad to be here. I'm Jay Robertson. Today I'm in Bentonville, Arkansas in the US. It's my base in the US when I'm not in Roatan, Honduras. I work with Prospera. We're a governance platform that powers the development of new cities and special economic zones. And I'm excited to join today because we work with a lot of nomads and a lot of people who are exploring being borderless or becoming borderless.
Wow, fantastic. Really, really interesting. And lots of people are off checking out Prospera now because that sounds really unique and interesting. Thanks, Jay. Over to you, Erin, then we'll go to Justin. think you could be on mute, Erin. Can we hear you, Erin? Hello, hello.
About that.
Okay, you're okay.
Hello, hello. It is so wonderful to be here. I'm Erin Riska. I am a longtime human resources professional and talent acquisition partner, providing services on a fractional basis to small and scaling companies around the world. I'm very excited to be here because I am a longtime digital nomad, just starting my 4th year of location independence along with my family, husband, 2 kids, and a cat along for the ride. So we spend most of our time outside the US, but I am joining you today from Colorado, which is our former home, spending a little bit of quality time with friends and family.
Fantastic, Erin. So great to see the Nomad families represented. Yeah. And over to you, Justin. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, and to continue with the theme, Jay, by the way, my dad lives in Roatan, so we'll have to get together the next time I'm down there. But my name is Justin Pecci. I'm the VP of Sales and co-founder of Torre. I've actually been working remote for 18 years now.
Wow.
So you're seeing me at my house in Guadalajara, Mexico, which is where my wife is from. We split time between here and California as well, but we spend more time in Mexico these days because of my wife. And I'm interested because, well, you can see the power of AI in my profile picture. AI created that. That's much more beautiful than my actual face. So as an example there for you as well. But I've hired more than 2,000 people directly for my companies in the past. So it's an important topic for me. And of course, with what we're building, which is autonomous self-driving recruiters. Data-driven, transparent, going to make recruiting fast, accurate, at a much lower cost. Basically, the future of recruiting needs to be more automated, and that's the technology that we're building at Torre. Great to be here.
Wow, fantastic. So what that sets us off with such a diverse and also obviously we've got a big theme on recruitment between Erin and Justin. So I think there's going to be some interesting I might stir up the pot a little bit there already, just to warn you, just to set you up for it. So fantastic. So I know someone's got some doggies in the background. That's fine. I'm not sure who has them.
That's going
but
to be me, by the way. So.
That's absolutely fine. So as long as I know where it's coming from and it's identified, I have no problem. We're very inclusive and dog friendly on these webinars, Justin. So all types of animals are welcome. No problem at all. So let's kick off today. And what I've suggested we do today, and I think it's the best way to kick this off. Before we look at benefits, let's look at that broader theme of emerging HR trends, right? So I'm going to go to Erin first, then to Jay, then to Justin, because I heard Erin in the green room and I have a little bias in terms of I overheard her setting out her cart in terms of emerging HR trends. So Erin, share with us.
Oh, wow. Where to begin? You know, as a talent acquisition professional, that is the lens that I look at human resources more generally through. And, you know, what I'm really seeing over the course of the past 12 to 18 months is a bit of a reckoning in the recruiting space, as so many companies that scaled very rapidly, very ambitiously, during the pandemic years when there was so much frenzy, we've really seen some companies peak and made some really tough decisions about having to scale back. And so we've seen quite a lot of reductions in force. They've been quick, they've been deep. And, you know, that's not to say that they've been wrong or problematic, but it hurts, right? And I think anybody who's spent any amount of time working in talent acquisition knows there's a cyclical nature to this work. But nevertheless, there is quite a lot of whiplash that has taken place over the last nearly 4 years, right? First, the dramatic cuts that happened at the start of the pandemic, and then the scaling up and then scaling back. And so what I'm seeing is more and more companies that are interested in and adopting more agile approaches to ensure that they have access to the talent that they need to make their companies great, right? And we're seeing that especially functions, particularly in recruiting, marketing, and a few other areas as well. So increasingly companies are partnering with service providers. They're tapping into talent as a service in order to have access to really high caliber strategic partnership. This is distinct and different from what we've seen in previous cycles, where there's a sort of a tepid, testing of the waters by relying on contract labor. This is very, very different. It is not transactional. This is relational. My own business is a wonderful example of this. I've been working as a fractional partner, providing talent acquisition support, strategic talent partnership for almost 4 years at this point. And I'm able to work with my partners on an embedded basis. These are enduring relationships. I understand their businesses deeply. I'm committed to, I'm invested in the work that they do. I understand what it takes to get the people that they need. And so we will see more and more of this moving forward. And this really aligns very, very well with what we're seeing among the talent community, as well as more and more professionals, those who really want that number one thing that we know is the fundamental driver of engagement in a career, and that is autonomy. We see more and more people like myself who are optimizing for autonomy by striking out on their own in this way, providing their services on a fractional basis to partner companies. So that trend will continue. We will also see a flavor of that provided by way of things like recruitment process outsourcing. We will especially see this in high volume recruiting environments. And I think this is one place where the work that Justin does with Torre, relying upon AI, we will really see that approach to recruiting add immense value to high volume environments.
Amazing, and check it in the post there. I think between Colorado, as we say in Ireland, and down to Guadalajara, Mexico, because you got your little bit of a reference into the AI. That's fantastic. Lots of the words I picked out there, which I think are really interesting. And I'm a tech veteran of 24 years. My first job in tech was a contract 24 years ago. Yes. So I think it's really interesting you've pulled out that resourcing relation, that you've pulled out. It's much more relational, it's not transactional, the fractional model. I thought that was really the agile approaches, the autonomy, all the things we know remote work brings. So I think that's a fantastic summary. Jay, I want to go to you next, because there's a lot to unpack there, but whether you agree with, go totally off tangent if you want. What do you see as emerging trends? Anything else? Anything different?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest trends that's kind of undergirding a lot of the points that Erin made that I agree with is we're operating under a backdrop of just macroeconomic uncertainty moving forward. For startups, it's a very difficult funding environment. With interest rates rising, it's a difficult financing environment for companies and projects that rely on that type of financing. And there's just a lot of uncertainty out there on the heels of the uncertainty that was caused by COVID. And I think as a response to that, we're also seeing more companies seek out what I like to call jurisdictional arbitrage. It's probably familiar to people who are remote or nomads, but picking and choosing the places that work best for you so that there are backup plans. For individuals, that can look like finding more residencies. We have a lot of demand for that. People who are looking for another passport, a second residency somewhere else to optimize for taxes, as there's uncertainty there. And then also a lot of uncertainty around regulatory regimes, especially for companies that operate in heavily regulated spaces. Web3 or crypto projects, a lot of uncertainty around how that's treated. AI seems to be coming down the pike as the next hot topic when it comes to regulatory. And so we see a lot of interest in people looking to optimize for the jurisdictions that provide the most advantages for companies that operate in those industries, but then also it's just a backup plan, like I said, for the macroeconomic uncertainty that we're seeing right now. I also really liked Erin's comments about project-based work or fractional work. and how that can feel very transactional. And that's something that we've struggled with, is how do you make that more meaningful? And I think we're working to try and provide more opportunities for that to grow, maybe not just in the traditional way that it would become a full-time role within the company, but that it could allow a person's side hustle to become their main thing, or allow for that to spin off into an entrepreneurial venture with the support of whoever's providing that project. And so I think that will continue to grow. We're just seeing more and more people who, almost everyone has a side hustle these days or something they're working on. And so exploring ways to support that, view it not as a competitive disadvantage for what they might be doing for your company, but in a way that you can support that and allow it to actually be mutually beneficial for the employee and the company.
Amazing. That was such a good build on what Aaron said. So thank you so much. You zoomed out and gave that macroeconomic, which is so important. That on top of what Aaron said about coming off the pandemic for the last 4 years, we are still dealing with that as a bigger picture, as a macro picture. But I think you also pull together some of those real threads about what companies need, what people are looking for, and that in some way, even though we're all in this together, that human touch is important. I picked that up through what you were saying as well there, Jay, and I think it really complements what Aaron said. So thank you so much. I'm going to very intentionally go to Justin now last, and throw down the gambit a bit and say anything completely different. If you feel like going there, do it, right? Because I'm all about, you can tell I've got a debating background, bringing in different points of view. So would you agree, would you disagree, or you know, do you think that there's anything completely different you could add to the conversation, Justin?
Well, I think what we're talking about here is trends, and trends always require a little bit of a backdrop. So historically, what's happened in the last couple of years, or even the last decade, the more and more people going remote, more and more people, more and more companies that are hiring overseas, and that creates an awful lot of challenges. And the biggest challenge is you've got 1,000 different HR tech companies out there in the world, especially popping up over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And is recruiting any easier today than it was before? Is it any less biased today than it was before? I would argue the opposite is true. And Aaron, maybe you can back me up on this. Recruiting is harder than it's ever been. It's more biased than it's ever been. It's more expensive than it's ever been. So why is that? And really, of course, that's the trend that I see is AI. So when you talk about AI, and many of you, here listening in, I've probably heard of 1,000 different AI and HR tech companies, right? And one of the challenges is that they're all doing pretty much the exact same thing. And what they're doing is they're taking the information that you can scrape from a digital profile, my LinkedIn, my CV, and they're saying, hey, Justin, because of your LinkedIn, this is a great job for you. Well, there's a lot of problems with that. I don't know about the rest of you, but my LinkedIn isn't up to date. It's not valid. It's not accurate. I hardly touch it other than to send messages. So if that's what you're using as data to build your AI on, it's not going to advance recruiting at all. So, and Ro, this actually goes back to your crystal ball. Nobody has a crystal ball. You've got to build it, I believe. So the approach that we're taking, and what I think will make a massive difference because of some of the things that Aaron mentioned. The world's going more remote. It's also going more, whatever the word is that you want to use, more freelance or more contractor type work. That is definitely where the world is going. It is absolutely more agile. So now the question becomes, how can I use AI and how can I use data to find the talent around the world that I need instantaneously? Well, the first thing you got to do, and one of the challenges of building a technology like this, why nobody, including LinkedIn, has been able to do it, is you have to be able to capture a lot of information that doesn't live anywhere digitally. Oftentimes when we're talking to companies, they say, I want to find the best developer in the world for, say, $5,000 US. Well, you're not going to find them in the United States. So let's talk about finding them elsewhere. Well, then challenges come in of how do I know they're professionally, culturally a match for my company? How do I know that this is a good salary for the region? So if you're going to build a global platform that uses AI that allows you to find the exact person that you need to find instantaneously, you've got to be able to capture a lot of data that doesn't live online, such as my personality, my professional culture. Where did I come from? Where do I want to go? Where do I not want to go? What's a skill I want to develop? What's a skill I don't want to develop? And if you're trying to build this AI on top of the data that you currently find online, you're going to fail. That's not going to advance recruiting. And then the second challenge, which is much more related to what Jay mentioned about the legality issues. The only way that you're going to be able to do something like this is by being fully transparent with candidates, fully transparent with companies, allowing them to see things like, how do I rank? Why do I rank that way? Who do I rank against? All of those things, but even one step farther, what's the math you're using to tell me that in your AI, I rank number 5? If you're not transparent with those types of things, it's going to be probably illegal at some point in many areas. States such as New York already make this more challenging. But you're also not going to be able to build trust with candidates and companies. And what we envision is that in the future, you'll find 7 billion people on a single platform instantaneously connected by using data. Sounds like sci-fi, yet we've done it in almost every other industry on planet Earth. I can find what I need on Google, I can find my video on YouTube, I can order my Uber. Yet recruiting, still 4,000 job boards, still 1,000 tech companies out there, right? The only way to really build this, to make this easier for companies and easier for candidates, giving candidates a much better experience, is by building a lot of technology inside of one house that captures a lot of information on people that doesn't currently live online. And that's the trend that I see. I don't think that I see it coming in 2024, by the way. If somebody could have built it that quickly, somebody would have done it already. However, it's step by step and step by step. And I think that AI is going to play much more of a role in the future of recruiting than it does today. And we're already seeing the power of that. For example, Aaron, you mentioned RPO. Typically in RPO, if companies want to outsource a big part of their recruiting, RPO companies traditionally will do their mathematics on one hire, one recruiter, 1 week. So one recruiter can make 4 hires per month. Well, AI, we've had a recruiter make 9 hires in an afternoon. That's going to be the power of AI behind RPO in the future. So a bit of a ways to go, but that's definitely the trend that I'm seeing, and I think that it's needed. Data can also help us to remove the biases that we all have, whether or not we want to admit it.
Wow, loads to unpack there, and that's fantastic. That is so comprehensive. What's interesting to me about the way, of course, we can tell you've been remote working for many, many years, right? Because you couldn't have come up with such a thorough analysis of recruitment in my book, anyways, and some of the ways that perhaps this trend could move, Justin, over the next few years, without obviously, and I love your, you seem to have a really good head of hair there, but there's definitely a sign of some knowledge in terms of gray hairs and having learned some of these things, perhaps the harder way over the years. So removing those biases, being transparent, all these things, really, really, really fascinating. What was really interesting to me, but it's for another webinar, but I'm going to throw it out there, is that if we can have that transparency on that matching to do with salaries and whether it be project rates as well. And if that was transparency was openly available, now you've got me super, super interested. So as someone who's been long time contracting and freelancing and doing what's now called fractional, it's always that open competition angle has always been a challenge in terms of both employers, projects, and companies being open on that. So that's got me really, really excited. And if a platform for recruiting could do that, if it could include salaries, then whoa, then I could get excited about that crystal ball. Fantastic. So I want to say to the audience, there's so much amazing insights we've gotten there already. So pop your Q&As in, or start to get them in if there's anything that you want to ask. We started to look at the trends, but this is very, very, very linked to the benefits, retention, how we take care of whatever the makeup of that team. Aaron was recently in Gran Canaria in 2019, pre-COVID, at an unconference there at Nomad City. I sat in a group of international leaders who were all talking about how to make contractors feel like they could stay with companies, how to retain them, how to make them feel like full-time employees. And here we are. Isn't that interesting, 3-4 years later? And actually, that's what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is it doesn't matter the nature of your contract, full-time, permanent, project, fractional. Jay, you touched on it as well with the side gig comment, that people doing side gigs could become these permanent resource for you. So how do we look at benefits, HR practices, supports to retain, to coach, to mentor, to keep people loyal? How do we take a people first leadership approach? So that's the question I'm going to move to next, with benefits weaved in there. Jay, I'm going to go to you first. Erin, then you next, then, oh no, I'll go to Justin after Jay, and then to Erin. Let's keep it short because I want to make sure. So just watch your time on this now. We've set the scene. So Jay, if you met me in a lift, what do you think in terms of that question would be your response in a couple of minutes where we're in that lift together?
Yeah, I think the key word's been mentioned a few times, and it's transparency. And so I can speak to this from our experience. It's when we identify needs that our company has as we're charting out where we're growing and what's coming up next. It's being transparent about those needs with people within our ecosystem to give people who are already partners of ours an opportunity to participate in those. And the unique thing about Prospera is that we're not just doing that as people who can work directly with us, but we're promoting opportunities for them to create entrepreneurial endeavors that contribute to the growth of a new city. And so it's really thinking about how can we be transparent about what the needs are and give them an opportunity to do that first, as opposed to just going somewhere else. I mean, it seems really basic, but it's something that makes people feel very much appreciated, whether or not it ends up developing, into an entrepreneurial endeavor or not. And so I think transparency is probably the most important.
Wonderful, and you built on a theme that comes up on loads of these webinars, Jay. Back to the whole fundamental point on good communications, documentation, writing in remote work. It's something, so being transparent for those offers that you've mentioned so that everyone can avail them with them. In my early days in tech, it would have been working with business analysts, project managers to spec out things really, really clearly. And now 20 years on, that's a skill that we see much more agilely producing documents and specs that are very, very clear on what those offers would be. So I love that. I think that's a really, really good place to start. Over to you, Justin. Anything else? Anything different?
Yeah, I always have something to say. So I agree, transparency by far number one. I think there are two other steps as well. And you know how when you're a hammer, everything's a nail, right? But I think if you can know ahead of time, because it's not like all freelancers, all contractors, it's not like they all want to feel like they're part of a full-time company, right? Otherwise they might search for something else. So I think if you can know ahead of time what you both want before the conversations even start, that's important. Technology can absolutely help there, no question about it. And then the next one is setting expectations. I think is very in line with what Jay said, but setting expectations. For example, if you come to work on my team, my interview process is very, very different. First off, I use my technology, but once we get on a call, it's basically me trying to scare you away. And the reason that I do that is not trying to, I don't want to try to sell you the opportunity. I don't want to misset those expectations. You get a document from me with 20 bullet points on my expectations of you, and I ask you to create one as well. That way, before we even start to work together, you know what I expect from you, and I know what you expect from me as well. A lot of that can be predetermined before you even get in a conversation in an interview. And then the remainder of that goes into what Jay mentioned with transparency and that setting of those expectations.
Whoa, nice, nice. And now we bring in the talent acquisition specialist. So this is perfect. This is going to be the icing on the cake, I think, here. So Erin, no pressure. Over to you.
Well, I would not disagree with either of these gentlemen at all, but what really stands out to me, and again, I'm looking at this through the lens of my own experience, and I'm looking at it through the lens both personally and professionally. And so one of the obstacles that companies that want to tap into fractional service providers, one of the challenges that they have, particularly for people like myself who are US citizens, whether we are US based or not, are the very complex, convoluted, and costly implications of healthcare coverage in particular. This is an enormous structural barrier to people like myself who do want to strike out on their own as entrepreneurs, as solopreneurs, whatever word we use. The fact that in the United States, healthcare, especially good, high quality healthcare, is almost exclusively accessible by way of employer sponsorship. So companies like SafetyWing in particular really bridge this gap. And I speak from experience here. I have been location independent, traveling full time with my family for 4 years, and we are longtime SafetyWing customers. SafetyWing is what makes it possible for me to be a self-employed business owner, to travel around the world, wherever I might like to be, work where I might like to be, and know that my family will be protected. So the products that SafetyWing already offers have immense value. And one of the reasons that is that they create these benefits for remote teams, but those teams can be comprised of people who are not formally employed by the company. And that is such a key point, because so frequently in the United States, we see carriers that cannot or will not insure individuals who are not formally employed by the company, or we see companies that are remiss to do that even when they have the option, because it is so stinking costly.
Wow, yeah, and that's laying it on the line, because this comes up so often. Any of my content on LinkedIn where I might comment as a European with a European passport and dripping with privilege. So in terms of having countries that provide equitable healthcare, and I have to be careful with my global audience, because this always blows my mind about America, and it is a big issue. So what SafetyWing are doing and other providers is really trying to meet this head on. But and I think health is fundamental here. Okay, so health is fundamental here for a lot of individuals considering whatever their contract, as you say, Erin, whatever their contract. This is a really important point. So if we take the basics like health, I want to move the conversation on and keep it on benefits, okay? Because I still think there's more to be done on benefits. So based on what we've said here, based on being, the context we have, you all have some amazing experiences. I'm sure there's other innovative benefits or other innovative offers you've seen that really make people feel supported. So I'm going to start with Justin, then go to Erin, then go to Jay. So what innovative benefits or supports have you seen coming out in recent years that you think should be highlighted as part of this discussion on emerging trends?
You know what? I'm going to pass the ball right off, Ro. This is definitely not my area of expertise whatsoever. And inside my company, we established something. It seems to be working well, but benefits is absolutely not my area of expertise.
And that in itself means it would be a benefit to work with you, Justin. I had to get that in, because knowing when to pass the ball is such a good leadership skill. Jay, over to you. Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, this is maybe something that I might have expected to come from Justin, but we've actually been trialing out using AI as a resource internally, because a lot of times people have those questions that they may not feel comfortable bringing up, or don't want to feel like they're bugging someone to ask. And AIs actually can be well suited towards those kind of specific requests. And it's not an end all be all, but it's something that we've actually gotten great feedback from people who said, hey, I don't want to bug the legal team to ask about this, but can I get a quick pass on this? Or the HR, the HR team may not feel comfortable bringing that up. And so that's something we've been trialing out. It's still early, but it's been really promising so far. And I think as those models continue to develop and mature, we'll see much more of that. But the key is that it has to be reliable, or people have to understand the limits of its reliability, so they're not relying on it, for something it can't provide.
Okay, that's fantastic. That's really interesting. Linking, just to passing that on to Jay, that was good. So that's a really interesting one to take away and to ponder. Erin?
Yeah, so it's very interesting, because of course when we hear the term benefits, I think so many of us, especially those with a US context, we do immediately think of health right? Health insurance. But when you build upon that, it's quite clear that people who are working need a much more robust safety net, right? And so beyond just health, I'm seeing so much more interest in wellness benefits, wellness programming, providing access to services either locally in real time or web-based services that help support a sense of wellness, well-being, mental health especially. This is an area that's really of interest to me because so much of the work that I do is in partnership with mental health organizations. I recruit a lot of mental health professionals, and so we saw such a dramatic shift in the purveying of mental health care at the start of the pandemic, as organizations had to throw open the doors, begin purveying mental health care on a remote basis, right? And that will continue. Many people do, of course, prefer to do work related to managing mental health, working face to face with a therapist. When you have a distributed team, when you are working with service providers or employees who work on a remote basis, that may or may not be possible. And especially with the nomads, they may want to work with someone who speaks their language, right? They may not want to meet with somebody in person in the country where they happen to be, spending a couple of months or even a couple of years. And so I think that remote therapy has really been top of mind, and there's an enormous amount of opportunity to tap into that. And then beyond that, other elements of a really robust safety net, particularly around things like income protection, right? And so, as well as retirement planning. These are both two areas that, along with health insurance, when you work on a self-employed basis, you have to take responsibility for these, right? This is the other side of autonomy.
Exactly.
You become responsible for things like income protection, because you don't have access to unemployment insurance in the same way that you might as an employee. You are responsible for your own retirement planning. You don't have a 401k, or at least not an employer-sponsored one. So more and more benefits that provide access to these fractional partners, whether they're going and securing them themselves or by way of their relationship with their clients. We will see so much more of this.
Fantastic. And I have two major clients that are insurance companies. Those who know me, and a lot of my team and I deliver via EAP programs in Europe. So they're employee assistance programs. So the fact that wellness has come up, I could do a whole session on this because I'm a wellness provider to many corporate clients via those insurance programs. And I know that that's something that links into all of these. And it also, Jay, links into your point about AI, which is really interesting, that I'm going to pick up on, that you're using that for people, looking at how people can ask questions within your team, because a lot of research shows that employees and team members, contractor or otherwise, are nervous about asking certain sensitive questions in the sphere, and a lot of wellness provisions are not taken up due to the risk of stigma. Say it be, as you say, they're nervous about asking a question, it's sensitive. So there's a whole area there that's emerging. We've had some wonderful SafetyWing partners like Plum, like Juno on, who lean into that as well, Erin, on mental health. So it's a really interesting one. And I know on wellness, when we look at that overall safety net, what I really want to bring it back to is that whether you call it benefits, whether you call it perks, whether you call it your package, whatever the word, because there's a lot of debate about the language in this. I think one of the things that I want to raise to everyone who's joining in, and we've got a couple of questions, is how are you doing that? Back to that word, transparently across all your teams, right? So be very careful on that as well, that what you're offering has equity and equality across the teams, because people, again, when we talk about offering something, we want to try and, be as inclusive as possible. And that can be a challenge with some of the things we're talking about. And secondly, and I'm looking at all of you because you're all leaders, in relation to this, my biggest piece of advice in all the companies I've worked with over the last 4 years of my team, test them yourself if you can, or find a trusted person who can test them on your teams. So whatever you may roll out, it's also very, very interesting to try and put yourself in the place of someone who may use them and test them in some way, or a trusted confidant within the team, and get some focus group feedback or something like that. Because sometimes it sits in isolation and leadership teams don't appreciate these wellness offerings that they might be putting out there. One project I work with, and I was mentioning this in the green room, got the feedback that from their teams, which was really changed the leadership thinking and actions, that no wellness package in the world could help alleviate their overworking and the amount of work overload and performance demands on them. So I think that's a message for everyone, that we need to realize that it's important as well as leaders to have that full context. Right, Justin, there's a question that's come in from you, so I'm going to throw it out there. Justin was talking about getting data about people who maybe don't live online from his AI perspective or AI project perspective. I think this is a really interesting question, so I'm throwing it out there to you now, Justin. What is the feasibility of getting such data, and how can we guarantee that or their authenticity of that data?
Sure. So the process of getting data, there's only one way to do it, and that is you have to want to provide that information. So we're not scraping it, we're not breaking any privacy laws. If you want to give it, great. If you don't. You can come onto our platform. You can create what we call a professional genome, which is your bio on steroids, your digital professional profile. It's completely free. We, of course, try to trickle you information over time to encourage you to provide more information that's going to show you better and better opportunities over time with the more data that you provide. How we verify that data, now that's an interesting question, and that's challenge number 2 of building a technology like what we're building. Challenge number 1 is how do we capture the data, which is what I was just talking about. Challenge number 2 is how do you make sure that the data is valid? Well, that requires feedback loops. So the way in which we do that is through 2 ways. One is through gamification on the front end, meaning that I can go in, I can create my professional genome, and then I can go to Aaron. Well, Aaron and I are just meeting, right? But I can ask Aaron, hey, can you verify this data point? Maybe we studied together, maybe we went to school together. That's how we can start to verify the information on the front end. But then, if you recall what I was talking about before, you need to build a lot of product in all of this, because right now recruiting is built in silos. So job board, network, tracking, testing, all inside one company. The real way in which that data is verified is on the back end through those feedback loops. To give you an example of that, I might say I've got 20 years experience in sales. Somebody comes through, I meet with a company and they say, no, Justin, that's not true. You only have 19 and a half. Oh, my fault. Well, that's now a feedback loop that we can use to verify data and information on the back end as well. But the real challenge is you have to want to provide that information. And why would you want to provide that information? To get better job opportunities more consistently, job opportunities that are meaningful for who you are and where you want to go. That's the reason why candidates right now, which we have around 26 million, are providing us with that information, because they want to have the chance to work with something that's meaningful for them where they're at today and for them where they want to go in the future. And that's a pretty big selling point as well. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, feel free to connect with me. I'm happy to follow up on that.
And he may answer his LinkedIn messages if you contact him on LinkedIn, because he flagged that question. So hopefully he'll make sure to do that. But I thought that was a really, really interesting question, and well answered there in terms of those feedback loops and verifying the data where and when we can. Okay, back to the topic in terms of trends. So one of the things that I noticed as I'm making my notes here is weaved within all of your answers. And maybe it's because it's late in the day in Spain. Maybe it's because I'm fine, mature like a good wine in terms of 24 years in tech. But everything you're talking about sounds like it takes a lot of learning, unlearning, relearning, because there's a lot of new things and concepts there for any people person, any HR professional to get their head around. Let's be honest, okay? From what's happened with COVID, we're all still in recovery, we may all be still in denial. From the pace of change, right through to some of the terminology and things we're talking about, okay? So I'm gonna lay it on the table, right? I'm gonna lay it on the table, going around the virtual room again. What would you say to someone who was a wonderful people person and a wonderful HR expert that you know deserves to hear the real truth about all of this, right? What would you say to them if you were having a coffee with them? What would should they focus on from today in terms of upskilling themselves, right? In relation to all of this, because there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to unpack. So I'm going to start with Erin. I'm going to go to Jay and then go to Justin. What would you say to them informally having a coffee? Give them that personal piece of advice. What should they focus that half an hour a week on in terms of upskilling their learning in relation to all of this? Because it's fast, Erin. It's fast. Where do you start?
It is, yeah. So, I mean, listen, human resources in particular, whether we're talking generally or talent acquisition specifically, they've been some of the hardest hit by the reductions that we've seen over the past 12 to 18 months, right? And those of us who've done this work for a long time, we just know this to be the life, right? I'm not joking when I say I've been reduced 4 times across the course of my 22-year career, okay? This is just the way of life when you work in this line of work. That said, it is going to be incredibly important for people who do work as human resources professionals, talent acquisition professionals, to really beef up their ability to provide real strategic partnership, right? Because all of the transactional elements of the work that HR and TA professionals do, all of those elements of this work, they will be replaced by artificial intelligence, okay? They will, to one extent or another, right? But there is no replacement for emotional intelligence. There is no replacement for real strategic partnership. So what this means is that you are going to need to deeply understand the business of the companies that you work for, whether you are an employer or you work on a fractional basis. You really have to understand their broader business, not just your little piece of it. And you need to be able to articulate what your value is, where you add that value in the business. So that is really, I think, the most critical piece around upskilling. It's not just about being a human resources or a talent acquisition professional. It's about being a strategic business partner.
Oh, and you know I love that as a leadership specialist in remote work, because people come to me and they say, well, surely I can just do that course, or surely I can take one of the LinkedIn learning courses you have, Ro. Applying that learning, as you say, Erin, in terms of that really strategic and emotional intelligence in terms of role playing, performance reviews, all the stuff that for now anyways, Justin, don't be looking at me, AI can't do yet. Okay, AI can't do yet. And so that's the piece as human beings we need to professionally develop. And it's not something you can do really through any type other than applied and other through experience on the job. So I totally agree with that. Jay, what do you think? What would you add?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing is to seize opportunities to do things differently when you have those, and try to provide more flexibility and options. That's I think a common theme that's come up multiple times here today. As an example, with Prospero, we were able to start from a blank slate. And so to tie this back to an earlier comment about the social safety net and social services, we know a lot of times those services are insufficient. And so at Prospero, we were able to rethink, how can we provide benefits differently? And at a jurisdictional level, we've come up with the concept of a labor benefit fund that collapses most of the things that are traditionally delegated to a National Health Services Agency or an individual retirement account. And it functions like a hybrid account for an individual, but the key is that the employer contributes and the individual has the ability to spend that in ways that work for them, within some really broad criteria. So you're not limited in ways you are with a health savings account where there are particular providers, or in a retirement account where there are withdrawal penalties. It's much wider. There are some limitations to ensure that it's actually being used for benefit, but it simplifies things radically for the employer, and it gives the employee so much more flexibility, which is something they really desire. And so in our experience, that's been a huge benefit to the employees, and it was an opportunity for us to rethink, how can we do this completely differently? So I would say definitely keep those in mind, because people appreciate options and they appreciate the flexibility.
Well, I love that, because one of the other things that we know, Jay, and you've said it there in terms of innovation, we know from the research on remote work skills, competencies and aptitudes is definitely that curiosity, that innovation, that constantly reviewing and reinventing. How can we do things differently? And that example sums that up. So that's a wonderful piece of advice to get people to think out of the box, to be innovative. Love that. Justin.
Sure. You know, everything is moving so fast that you really have to be careful with your time. And in many cases, I don't even try to keep up anymore. I sign up for a couple of newsletters that are specifically revolved around HR tech, even more specifically AI and HR tech. I sign up for some of the things that companies are building because I love it. I just love it. Other than that, I don't. However, what I will say is if you're in this space, the first thing I do without even thinking about it, wink, wink, is figure out how to make AI my best friend. But more importantly than that, I think here's how I would look at the situation. And this is how I look at pretty much every situation. If you think about it from a first principles perspective, what's the future of the industry going to look like? And then what I would do is start to ask, how can I be part of it? And from there, I would use the only two teachers that life really offers us, and that's either learn by failure or learn through a mentor. You can take as many classes as you want, but I find that those two to be significantly more effective. And what I would probably focus on are those fringe, not fringe, but those things that are always going to remain important. Some of the things that Aaron is more of an expert in, I think, than I am, maybe even perhaps Jay as well, but those things like on the benefits side, on the legal side, on the relationship side, on the strategy side. I wouldn't probably focus on necessarily the talent acquisition side, because I think that that's one area where technology is going to be extremely helpful in the future. And from there, you've got to be an expert. So dial in on those things and study your ass off, and opportunities are going to arise, like Aaron mentioned. It's waves. But make AI your best friend. I think that that's going to be important in the future. You're going to be light years ahead of the competition.
Wonderful. Absolutely love it. And you don't realize, but maybe you do, that you've actually brought it back to one of the points at the start when we spoke about, we used the words agile, we use the words always learning in terms of HR trends, because that's exactly what you've answered with Justin in terms of, you focus on a couple of things, but to figure out how to use AI, and I'm doing this at the moment myself, I'm working on a couple of live projects within AI mentor, believe it or not, who is one of my clients, and we're actually testing out some really practical things, Justin, because for me, that's how I learn all down through the years of tech. There's no point in doing, I can do a course here and there, I can read articles, but I have to make it practical. So to Jay's point as well, that innovative use, bring it into practice, make it agile. Now we're going to finish up in a minute, but I want to see if there's any last minute questions. There isn't one that has come in, but I know we've just answered it. So whoever asked that on AI and creativity, I hope you noticed that we kind of weaved it in there, and I've just joined the dots a little bit on that in terms of linking it together with the panel. So Aaron, in summary on that question about what should HR professionals be focusing on, she in summary spoke about emotional intelligence. She spoke about honing your skills in terms of strategy with your clients, and really just leaning back in on the core skills that people professionals have. So I'm summarizing for that. Jay spoke about innovation, using a really different way, thinking out of the box, and he gave a wonderful project example from Prospera there. And Justin, in terms of how to keep up skill set, think about applied learning, using a mentor and putting it into practice, being innovative in action. So that, to me, all of those things lean into being creative. So let's just see if there's any more questions that have come in, and if not, I'm going to, don't see anything else, but we did have a question come in on how AI is not very creative. That was the question of what could be the comment being in terms of recruitment and be using AI more creatively. And I think we've more or less answered that. I'm not going to go back and go over it, because yeah, I'm a traditionalist. Yeah, I've got my artist handbook. Yeah, I believe humans are the real, creative before the machines. So hopefully by taking away your creativity in the way you use AI, and we've all hinted at on that in the panel, you can get some ideas there rather than waiting for AI to be creative for you. So in summary, and we're just coming up on the hour, I'm going to let each panelist give me one word, please, to sum up what they'd like to leave with as a takeaway, and then we'll finish up since there's no more questions. Starting with you, Jay, what would be your one word in terms of those HR trends?
Innovate, I think would be my one word.
Nice, nice. Justin?
Kick ass. I know it's 2 words, but that's just hyphen.
That's
There you
okay.
go.
It's all right. I'm Irish. I'm liberal. Kick ass is good. Erin?
Optionality.
Ooh, nice. There you go. Thank you so much. So signing off and saying buenas tardes or buenos dias to Mexico. Thank you, Jay in Arkansas, for your time today. Really appreciate it. Erin in Colorado. Take care and don't forget to register. You've got the QR code for the next SafetyWing webinar or demo there with the QR code on the screen. Thank you so much. I've been Remote, Rowena Hennigan. Looking forward to seeing you again soon on the next SafetyWing webinar. Take care.